ultimately it to be a conversation and there's just a camera over the shoulder.
Accept that there's people that are going to be better than you at that specific thing. So I know there's going to be someone that's better at editing.
You know, and you could sit around and say, well, I haven't started on the main script because I'm waiting for it to be inspired, right? When you show up and you sit down and you go to your spot, the inspiration does come.
If I don't put my skin in the game, shed a bit of blood, how could I expect for the return I'm hoping for to be as severe as the sacrifice?
A lot of people will be like, I could never do, I have no idea how to do, and I didn't either, for the most part. It's just sitting down and taking the time to learn it once, and then when you do, it's like, oh my gosh.
What today's episode is going to be about is creativity just in general. I kind of want it to be a deep dive into the idea of creativity and how we as humans go through creativity, engage with creativity. And that's ultimately what this podcast is supposed to be about, is just people's engagement with creativity, because it is a resource in a sense. Like it's something, I think anyone who's been in a creative flow moment, creativity storm, whatever you want to call it, I think anyone who's experienced that miracle really is going to agree that it's something otherworldly. It's not necessarily like, I don't know. It's hard to describe in words. One, because I'm not the most articulate person, but two, because it's really just a feeling, and especially as Americans, but in general, humans have a hard time describing feelings. And creativity is just an experience. And I think it's an experience that we should all have, and we should all have common in our lives. What I want to do in today's episode is talk about creativity as long as it's existed in the form of art. I want to talk about different factors that go into creativity. I want to talk about how we hit hurdles as creative people and how people can kind of turn away from creativity and creative acts. I think there's a lot to be said here. And I also want to talk about ways that we can get back, to being creative people. So thank you for watching this far. This is generally when people sign off. So thank you for liking and subscribing. But those of you sticking around, I do hope that with the help of AI, I am able to bring something of some critical value to you. So kind of getting into the introduction. Creativity is something that has existed, and I believe, now I have very limited research into this and very few studies to support this, but I believe that creativity is an inherent trait that we all have. And some people are definitely more gifted and some people are not. But I think it, like speaking, like breathing, like any other skill humans have, I think we all have the function of creativity. Now, today's exploration is going to be the focus of art, expression, creative expression, which I think is art. But there's don't get me wrong, creative expression happens in all things. And I'll tell anyone that the way you do accounting is creative. There's something that came up in my research talking about novelty versus creativity. And I thought that was a very interesting idea. I didn't fully go into that. So that might be even an episode in the future. So make sure to come back for that. But looking at art and the history of art in humans, as far as I understand it, 30,000 years ago, we have dated back 30,000 years, the oldest artistic expression. Those are cave paintings. I believe those are the Lascaux paintings, but they could be something else. But they found paintings in Europe, artifacts of early humans. And since then, we've obviously seen the progression of art. Now, if you even want to just go back a couple thousand years, couple tens, hundreds, generations, we have creative art in paintings on vases, we have paintings of walls, we have Rembrandt, we have Mozart, we have all these different types of creative outlets that people are creating in. We have, you know, it's a beautiful thing. And there are creative geniuses, and then there's the people who support those. You know, there are a lot of aspects in the creative process, right? So if we can look back, just let's say 10,000 years, because 30,000 years is a long time. But in some of my research, they're saying up to 165,000 years ago, there was creative expression in small forms, whether it be bead making, necklace making. There was the increased symmetry on tools and weapons. They saw that as a creative expression, as art. So, you know, there is a long-standing history of art and humanity. Going into that, we understand that there is a need for it, an intrinsic human need for it. There's just something that happens when we create that, again, it's supernatural. You know, I'm gonna be called whatever, and that's okay. But it is a form of presence. It's meditative. It's wonderful, and the process of becoming better and more skilled and increasing your growth, increasing your ability to get to the point of flow state, that automatic pilot, the repetitive tasks that you can do without thinking, is a beautiful thing. And one of my most recent episodes, I think EJ made a really good point at saying, like, this is what happens when you get into flow state. The whole world kind of drops around you. It doesn't matter what you bring into the pottery studio. So it's the pottery episode. It doesn't matter what you bring into the pottery studio. It doesn't matter, you know, you're coming home from work. It doesn't matter. The second you get into it, especially when you're starting out, you have to focus on so many different things that, you know, what your parents said last week, you know, you just got broken up with. I'm definitely not taking these from things in my own life. These are just random, coming from unexplicable things. These are definitely not things coming from my own life. But the fact that you want a dog but can't afford it, you know, things like that kind of just melt away. And you're actively working on this thing in front of you. And in that conversation, I briefly talked about this really brief research I did before that episode, which was talking about how clay working especially is a way for it to be a very therapeutic thing, because there is a very tactile, hands-on, you can almost like sense this change happening. And, you know, it's very interesting. So I turned for the first time in my life this morning. So I went to a patio studio and I did it. And it was interesting because I went in a bad mood, because yesterday was actually supposed to be my appointment. And I thought it was today. So when I showed up today, I realized that I had to pay for a whole new session because I didn't get my last session. So that really sucked. And immediately the girl's like, do you want to pay for another? Like, I'd imagine you don't want to. And I was like, no, I'm here. I said I'd do it. It's worth what it's worth. Let's just do this. And I was, again, bad mood. I'm spending more money than I wanted to. I got lost on my way there. It wasn't a great, and like, I've been having a tough week. So I get in there. I don't know anyone. I'm by myself, which just puts us all on edge. It really does. I mean, you know, it takes practice to get comfortable being by yourself. And I'm normally comfortable in most situations. But in this situation, I was mad. I felt ostracized. It just, you know, whatever that word means. But I felt isolated in this group because I didn't know anyone. And then the guy was like, oh, and because I was late to the show, they didn't have a spot for me, so they had to create a station for me. It was a whole thing. And so I felt some shame in that moment. It wasn't a great moment. And then he shows us how to start, and he walks us through the process. And with a little bit of information that EJ had given me in her shop, I was able to kind of actually do better. And I was like totally expecting to not be good, but I also wanted to go in with a bunch of false confidence and see what would happen. I'm trying to be more confident in my life, and it worked well. My first cup, I mean, it's not even professional quality. Don't even talk to me about that. But the people around me were commenting on the fact that mine looked like a cup. There was definitely some discussion of like, oh, and like mine looked more like a cup, but it also was a disaster. Like it was folding in on itself. It was too thin in areas. He made a couple comments about how the bottom was probably not thick enough for him to wire it. So all in all, I wasn't great, but I was better than I expected to be. 1. 2, my mood leaving versus my mood starting was night and day difference. Again, I was feeling shame. I was feeling the weight of I'm trying to be better with money and then immediately have to spend double on this. To at the end, I didn't mind giving a big tip because this gentleman gave me a great experience and taught me so much in that little bit of time. And so the therapeutic nature of just working with your hands and actually creating something and building something, it was great. I think people should do it. But getting back to the actual information I want to bring to you today is that creativity and the expression of art and the expression of oneself through creativity has existed for a long time in humanity. And it is imperative that we follow that urge. And I think that everyone has the ability to do these things, but they just don't know the outlet yet, if that makes sense. For instance, like sometimes I feel like videography and photography and visuals are not where I'm supposed to be. I feel like it would have happened if it was going to happen. And I get into these states of, should I do something else with my life? And then I get stuck in the mindset of, I have all this gear that I'm currently using, which is so cool to look out and see this gear that I've amassed. It's a really cool feeling. Like I get the feeling of the people I interview now that they're like, wow, you have like a production set. And so it's really cool to see this in front of me and get to use this. But normally, when at the end of my day, I've sent 40 emails and I've received 10, and I'm waiting to hear back, and the 85-90% of my work has nothing to do with creativity and being in the moment, and it has everything to do with administrative work and stuff that's just draining to me. At the end of the day, I look at my life and I say, I don't know if this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't know if this is what I want to be doing. And it sucks. Then in those moments, the other, I think it's 5% because there's another 5% in what I'm doing. But another 5% is when I'm actually on set and I'm talking to people and I'm having these interactions and I'm filming people and there's creativity flowing and I'm in a good edit or whatever I'm doing. I feel freedom and I feel like myself. And a lot of times when I'm in that 90% or I'm doing other things in my life or I'm having a bad day or I'm just like in a bad mood, which has been happening a lot recently. When I get into those creative expressions, those things just fall away. At the same time, I'm looking at this gear and I'm saying, this is the commitment that my past self made to me today that I'm going to keep going forward. And that is what I see when I see my gear, and it keeps me going. And part of that, which is interesting in some of my research, was there was a study that talked about increase of creativity. So what they looked at different, it was the SDT, or self-development theory, I believe, talks about there are 4 types of motivation. And then they also said there was 4 types. Let me see if I can even just pull it up. There are 4 types of 4 criteria for creativity as well. So the 4 criteria for creativity in this study was divergent thinking, originality of ideas, persistent attitude, and intellectual risk taking. And it defines that. I might even link this in the thing, but I doubt anyone's going to watch this. I doubt anyone cares. So I'm going to continue going. If you want to email me, I don't care, or leave a comment. But in this study, it talks about those 4 points are for are how they measured creativity. Then they have the 4 motivations, right? So there's intrinsic motivation, which is internal motivation that says, I'm going to keep going even though I don't have any viewers, even though I don't have enough money to support this. Whatever obstacles you face, you just keep going because all you want to do is get better at the craft. That's intrinsic motivation, as I understand it. Correct me if I'm wrong. Then there's achievement motivation, which seems pretty self-explanatory, but that's becoming a filmmaker to win an Oscar. That's, becoming a filmmaker to win Sundance, to have your paintings hang in the Louvre. These are achievements that you create. Winning a commission, or winning an art contest, or winning American Idol even. These are achievement-based motivation. Then there's avoidance motivation, which even just reading the definition, I was like, this is not a good one. And that is avoiding failure. And it was looking into how avoiding failure affects creativity as well. The last one was extrinsic motivation, which is external motivation. That's saying, I can't go to the gym without a personal trainer. I can't do this. I can't do that without, my muse, without inspiration coming to me, things like that. So they broke it down. There was like 190 something participants. It was for Russian art and design, or creativity and design students, something like that. But basically they created a questionnaire for these students in a very specific field. And they found as many as they could. And they had them do one of those strongly agree, strongly disagree for yourself exams that ask questions like, I feel bad after, didn't see the questions, didn't go that deep. I'm not that kind of guy. Did I feel bad about receiving feedback? How did I feel achieving something after, whatever stuff, whatever questions? You get the format. The format is, like, I feel X when Y happens. I feel Y when X happens. Stuff like that. And so of those students, it came back that intrinsic motivation, that internal motivation, had a highly positive impact on intellectual risk-taking and persistent attitude. That's the ability to keep going and take risks in the face of adversity. It also had positive correlations with originality of ideas and the divergent thinking. However, achievement motivation had the largest amount of impact on all 4 categories: divergent thinking, originality of ideas, persistent attitude, intellectual risk-taking, by a wide margin. And then we get into the ones that kind of make sense, even more sense, where that avoidance, that fear of failure, had all negative impacts. And the worst one was the originality of ideas. To me, that just makes sense, that if you're scared to fail, you're not going to take risks. If you're scared to fail, you're not going to make really original ideas. You're not going to think differently. And you're not going to keep going. Because why keep going if you're scared of failure? You're not going to keep going. So that just makes sense to me. Extrinsic motivation also makes sense, but it was a lot more heavily weighted than that fear of failure. Whereas fear of failure was, marginal in some areas and pretty heavy in others for its negative impact. Extrinsic was mainly heavy. And that makes sense, right? If you're always waiting for something to get you somewhere, you're not going to get there. It's very interesting. I come from a Christian background, and it's like, if you just keep praying for something to happen, some things prayers don't answer. You have to go out and you have to do that action. I try to be a very action-oriented person, so that also just made a lot of sense to me. So, with that being said, I think what happens when people are in this fear of failure, when they are waiting on motivation, I think those are 2 of the biggest killers just right off the bat. I think anyone can identify with that, anyone who's creative. And that, I feel like, is when that achievement motivation can reverse. Because every day, for one reason or another, I'll say the same sentence to myself. Just, it's just a Mad Lib. You can just change the words. but it's basically all I need to do is get here, and then it'll all be good. I say this about everything. Oh, all I need to do is get down to this weight and I'll be fine. All I have to do is get a girlfriend and I'll be fine. All I have to do is X and Y will happen. You know, like my life will be complete, as if that's ever happened. I've hit a lot of milestones in my life, and guess what? I'm still living. Like, it didn't just retire. And I think it's like the happily ever after at the end of the story. It's clearly not the end of the story. That's why there's 4 Shreks and not 1. That is an explanation for why I think people don't feel like they're creative. I have people who tell me all the time, and it hurts me a little bit. It hurts me a little bit, like right here, a little bit right here in the heart. Every time someone says, you know, I'm just not creative like that. And I get it. I'm a hyper creative person. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try to be creative, right? That doesn't mean that you shouldn't find the outlet that makes you creative. All that means to me is that you haven't tried enough things. And that brings us into the next thing, right? There's that intrinsic motivation, because like if you're waiting for external, if you're waiting for, if you're avoiding the failure, you're not going to have that. You're going to have low internal intrinsic motivation, and you're not going to think you're going to do much with it, and so you don't do it. I just finished watching The Sopranos, and it was really interesting because one of the people, Bobby, starts messing around with trains, and he's a mob captain, or I'm not sure, but he's in the mob, and he is a dad that is just playing with model trains in his garage, and that is his creative pursuit. And that is so interesting to me because they added that, because his character, blah, 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 blah. We can go into, you know, he never really wanted that life. That life was thrust upon him. But the reality of the situation, or, you know, it's even just the person adding a humanity to the role, whatever the case is, that is someone who has found something that is important to them that is a creative outlet. And I think we all need that. What starts to happen, and in some of my other research, right, is we get that psychological fear of, you know, not being good. And that's perfectionism. And perfectionism is the fear of the conditions not being right, the fear of the outcome not being exactly what you want, and paralysis is an outcome of that. So not going for it, not doing it, because it's not going to achieve what you want it to achieve. And so you kind of maybe like want to flip that on its head. What is the achievement, right? Because if you change the goal, that achievement motivation changes, right? So like I'm trying to learn guitar right now, and I'm not trying to learn it in the way that like, oh my God, like blah, 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 like I want to be Leonard Skinner. No, I'm playing it as in like I tried when I was 6 and bought a guitar in 2020 when I was 21, 22. And I've had it for 5 years. And I know a couple parlor tricks, as in like I know a couple songs, because you can muscle memory your way through it. But I don't know the chord progressions, and I don't know, you know, stuff like that. And so I bought this book that's for beginners and is literally teaching me like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. But the process of learning to read music while I'm playing it was such a cool thing for me that I sent it to my friend who's been playing guitar since he was, 4. He's been playing it forever, Colin. And I was so proud of that, because my achievement wasn't, oh, I'm going to be a rock star. My achievement was, I want to learn how to craft this skill. I want to get better at just this skill, because I think it's interesting, and I think creativity is something we all need, right? And so like that was the skill part of it. And then where it's kind of led was I started pairing some of the chords that I learned from those songs and those parlor tricks, and I looked up, you know, how to write a melody, and it's like, oh, it's basically like you have a story happening, and it goes up, it goes down, and then it closes off and it opens up. And so like when you look at that structure, and then you have those understandings, and then you have these tools that you start putting together, it's so funny because in my mind, it's like when I first started editing videos, right? Like I'm taking this chord and I'm putting it with this chord, and it feels better if this chord comes after. No, it feels better if this chord comes after. And those are pieces of video, right? And then you're like, then I found this, I did a quick Google search on how to make a melody. And it's like, try to play the scale, play different notes on the scale in between chords. And if you can play notes on the scale that the chord exists, or play notes that exist within the chord, it'll be a lot easier. And then I just started like finding these progressions that I really liked, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I know it's not going to be classically trained. And again, it's not. Someone tried to talk me into lessons, and I can't afford the lessons right now, but I'd love to. This is my way of doing that, right? And so it's changing that from like the psychological fear of like, I'm gonna look like an idiot. I'm gonna look like that guy in Animal House who's playing guitar on the stairs and everyone hates. And then he, John Belushi picks up the guitar and smashes it, and he's like, "Oh, sorry." Like, no one wants to be that guy. He's a douche, right? But I also looked inside myself and said, I want to learn guitar. And part of that is looking like a douche. A second part of why we have this psychological fear of doing creative things is the societal and systemic pressure, right? I had someone when I was younger say, you major in what makes you money and you minor in what makes you happy. And that's depressing. Why wouldn't you put your life into what you enjoy? Like, why wouldn't I work on the better thing, the thing that makes me happy, right? If I'm working for money, and the idea is money's gonna make me happy, why not just do a thing that's making me happy? There's this parable that I've seen in a lot of self-help books and business books, and I saw it, I think, in the 4-Hour Work Week first. But there's a fisherman and and a guy on vacation. And the guy on vacation says, "You know what? What does your life look like?" And he says, "You know what? I wake up every day. I get to go fishing. If I catch some fish, then I can feed my family and have a good time, and do a little dancing, do a little drinking, and then I go to bed, and I wake up the next day and I do it all over again." And the guy says, "Well, if you get another boat and you expand your franchise and you put your focus into your work, you can retire earlier." And he says, "Okay, well, what do you do when you retire?" And the businessman says, "Oh, well, when you retire, you like fishing, you could go out fishing and you could catch some fish. And then at the end of the day, you can have food with your family. And then you can go out dancing and drinking and have a good night." What the businessman's not understanding is that this man's already doing this, right? He's having his retirement as he's working. Whereas the other man, and he has enough, right? That's the true part of that, is like the kernel of that idea, and why people bring it up is like, what works for you, right? And so I think it's really interesting because a lot of times in the past, people have told me, you're too good for this job. You should be doing something better. You should be doing something that pays better. You should be doing something that activates you more fully. And then I come back to that 90 and that 5. 90% of the time, I'm doing stuff that I don't want to do. I don't know if you've ever uploaded a transcript or gone through a transcript for a video. It's not the most fun thing. It's an administrative task. It's lame, right? Especially on a podcast. I'm not reading that. There's going to be errors in it because I'm just not going to do it. That falls in the 90%. But the 5% is sitting down and setting up my cameras. I've been doing this all weekend. I set them all up, and then I got tired when I realized I didn't have any battery left. So I had to shut down, got to a point where I could say, this isn't it. And then today I was just like in a little bit of a slow mood. So then I got back to researching, and then I wrote on my whiteboard, and I was just like, I want to get this thing filmed by Wednesday. And then I said, why am I waiting until Wednesday? I have some research generated by AI. They did a good job. I've looked at some of the studies. I don't need to look at all of them. I'm not going to look at all of them, right? Call me out if this is wrong. Call me out if this isn't right. I don't care about that. What I care is about making my argument. And AI is a tool to help me make my argument. And I could be wrong. But as of right now, I'm seeing some real world solutions where if people aren't good at the art they want to do right away, the negative talk starts there. I saw it this morning with the people in my pottery class. Like the woman next to me, she was doing a fine job. She had never done this before. She kept looking over at mine and making comments about how I looked like I had done it before, and hers didn't look great, and she wasn't doing it right. And then she learned how to do it, and she got better. And at the end of the class, she took a picture of her stuff. And that's the moment. That's what it's about. It's about going further. At a certain point, I was just like, hey, just so you know, my friend's a professional. And they gave me some pointers. Kind of true. I interviewed a professional, so I got to see it hands-on and engage with them. So yeah, I had a little bit of a cheat sheet in my pocket. But that shouldn't matter, right? If you're doing something new, you're going to suck at it. Like, I've never really read a full study. I've read abstracts before, but I've never read a full study. It's stupid. The amount of explanation into how I get why it exists. I know it's vitally important, but for me, I don't need to read what you did, why you did it that way, how, effective it was. Again, this makes total sense to me. I don't want to read all that. I want to see the results and the efficacy. If it was actually effective, right? If this questionnaire you asked all of these college students or master's students was effective. Going back to this, the study showed that people who were scared of failure and people who were looking for external motivation, extrinsic motivation, were less engaged with creativity. And this wasn't this was Russian art and design. This was a creative field, right? And we all face that. I face it all the time. So where do we go from there? What's next? Well, AI, thanks to Gemini, shout out to Google, not sponsored, but should be. You got to shift your mindset. You got to change your goals. I've been saying that, but the mindset shift that kind of came up in this research I did was to focus on the practice. And really, there is this other thing that came up, this other thing that I briefly glanced into. I have what you would call a kindergarten understanding of neuroscience. What I mean by that is I have watched Andrew Huberman's podcast, and I had a roommate who was in PT school, and he would tell me about his neuro class. And so we had some discussions. But one of the things I do remember from all of this kindergarten understanding of neuroscience is what the prefrontal cortex is, otherwise known as the front of your brain. There's 4 or 5 parts. I looked up a YouTube video yesterday. Blah, 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 blah. This is the executive function of your brain. Decision making happens here, right? And when you primarily it's also where your inner critic is. If you primarily use this, it's called hypofrontality, right? In the hypofrontality, what happens is that exact process that EJ described. The world falls away. You don't listen to that inner critic. You don't hear society telling you that you're wasting your time, your money, or your energy, that you need to do something else. You just are engaged in your video work, in your play, in your writing, in whatever it is you are creating. And that should be your goal. That should be all of our goal, is how do I get to flow state? How do I get to be present doing something I enjoy doing? One of the things that you can do is create rituals. There was a time I was trying to do that where before every photo shoot I would do the same stretches I would do before I worked out. And the thought I had was, it gets my blood flowing. If I do it before I work out, right? My blood's going to start, when I start doing these stretches, my blood's going to start flowing, right? Going to start pumping in order to get prepared for the increased exercise I'm about to do, lifting, running, whatever it is. Now, if I do that before I do photography, right? If I just travel 2 hours to Flagstaff and take someone's grad photos, not a real example at all, and I do these stretches when I get out of the car, then my blood starts pumping and I get ready for the moment. Blood starts going to my brain and I'm getting engaged, right, with the moment. That was a ritual I was trying to create. Since then, it has changed because also my format routine has changed. Life just changes, right? I haven't really done a photo shoot since then. Since this hypothetical situation that definitely did not happen. There was something that came up in this work, um, was the artist's way, I think is what the book is called. I don't know it. I didn't read it. Um, let's see. It was written by Julia Cameron, so shout out to her. But again, I didn't read it, but I thought this first thing was interesting. The one of the She has two practices that she wants you to do to increase your creativity. In the morning, the first thing you should do is write three, and that's what's right here, my journal. You write 3 pages, minimum of 3 pages. It has to be 3 pages of continuous thought. I'm trying to think of what it's called. Is it in here? Stream of consciousness. You write long form stream of consciousness note taking, right? You just say, I had a weird dream last night. I dreamt that I had no shoes and I was caught in a flood in Indonesia, and I was trying to figure out where I was going, and I was trying to get to the creperie. This is my dream last night. I was trying to get to the creperie, but my brother, who was an orphan, I don't know who this person was, but for some reason it felt like my brother. Just write all of that out and just keep going. And this goes, and 2.5 pages later, and this goes to the day I woke up late for school, and I had to get into homeroom class, and then I realized that I didn't put on deodorant, and the rest of the day I smelled so bad that, so you blah 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 blah, right? You just write everything that's on your mind. And she calls it a brain scrub, and it's meant to be boring, and it's meant to be awful apparently, but you are clearing out, right? You're engaging. Journaling is a creative thing. I think it's the easiest way to become creative, because literally it's just writing randomly. You're just writing things. I mean, you could go to the extent of the scene from The Shining, where he just writes the same all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy over and over and over again 1,000 times. You could do that, I guess, if you want to waste your time, but you can do it. But journaling, I think, is one of the easiest ways into the subconscious, in my experience. A lot of what I talk about is anecdata, which is anecdotal data. Just know I'm not a professional, so don't look to me as one. And then the second part of this is the artist's date. Now, this is supposed to be what I did this morning, right? This is supposed to be scheduling a novel situation, right, where you go out and you engage by yourself with a new artistic form. And that's what I did today by going turning for the first time. And like I said, I was good, not great. It was really bad. But I got to a cup and no one else got above a bowl, which I think was where they were like, oh, he's good. And I was like, no, these are not good. And I think the guy also was really nice to say, like, you're rushing, but didn't say that. And yeah. So that's the second part of this, is create situations where you get to be creative in a new way that you haven't done. Whether that's learning to play guitar. Again, none of these are my experiences. These are just random examples I'm pulling out of thin air. Learning to play guitar, doing a pottery class, drawing, just sketching. You've never really sketched? Just get a sketchbook and a pencil. One of the easiest things to do. Or journaling. Try journaling if you haven't tried journaling. Scrapbooking, I don't know. That's legitimately not an example. I mean, I could try scrapbooking, but I don't have enough photos. Like, that would be cool, right? You could print out photos. I mean, it's a little bit more high cost, but I think the reality of this is just doing new novel things, because you're going to find something. We all have something, right? For some people, it's lowballing people on Facebook Marketplace, and they are Rembrandt with that message box. I mean, the stuff I see of people harassing people on Facebook Marketplace, it's chef's kiss. Cooking is another example. Writing. Maybe you just want to write, yeah, that's basically journaling, but like handwriting or typing. Try video editing. Video editing is honestly one of the more immediately gratifying things, but then it's also one of the things where, like, I think the way snowboarding has been described to me is how I feel like video editing is, where it's easy to get into it, but it's hard to master. I don't feel like I've mastered video editing. And then coming into the end, I think, you know, man, this is really, I think it's so funny because when I use AI, it's really a great jumping off point. We all know that. Blah, blah, blah. When I use AI, it's clearly a really good tool for a lot of reasons. It's also very, very, very general and mainstream, and just it's I believe the term is aggregate, right? It's an aggregate or whatever. But it's like, it's the definition of if you're gonna please everybody, you're gonna please no one. That's how I feel about AI a lot of the times. It gets me where I need to go, but it really it doesn't cover all the ground I need it to. And obviously it's an iterative process. And the whole thing that we've been talking about in this podcast is it's an iterative process. But again, that's just a quick side to do or opinion that was unsolicited. This whole thing's unsolicited, by the way. Thank you for checking it out. I doubt you made it this far, but I appreciate you pretending like you did. So to tie this all together, right? We as humans have either evolved, or if you believe in creationism, then you believe in the idea of divine gifts, right? You've been given your set of skills, you've been given your ability, your life, right, was given to you by a divine creator. And in my last episode with Hunter, we talked about how creation, the act of creativity, is one of the closest things you can do to God. We all have been given the opportunity to create. We all have things that we can do. What you want to do is stop being in the lower two forms of motivation, that extrinsic, right? That fear of failure, right? Stop using those. Start using intrinsic and achievement-based motivation. It's going to give you more returns. Theoretically, that study had its merits. It also wasn't a big enough size. There's a lot of stuff to it. But basically, I think we can all agree that some of the things that hold us back are a fear of failure and waiting for the perfect circumstances. That perfectionism comes in and it just decimates us, right? And someone says, what are you doing with your life? I've had people say that. I've had people who just met me, strangers, say that I was wasting my parents' money on a college degree in filmmaking. And you know what? Maybe they were right, but again, I think you'd rather major in your happies than minor in them. So like, you know, focus on that 5% that gets you to a 90. You know what I'm saying? You probably don't. I don't know. If you listen in here, in your heart, gut, whatever you want to say, you acknowledge that there is reason to you creating. You maybe even take these tips from Julia Cameron, and you stream of consciousness, write out and just clear out your mind, and then you try new things until you find the right thing, until you get to the point where you're like, this is my thing. I spend 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours a day at a computer just typing away at emails, or just, I had a friend who worked in customer service. I spent 10 hours a day getting yelled at on the phone. I answer the phone and they're already at a 10 and they're just yelling at me. And my job is to not give them off to someone else. I have to just sit there and take it. But on the weekends when I make furniture, when I restore old furniture, it makes it all worth it, right? Find those things. Go out and sketch, write, read poetry, make poetry, dance, do whatever it is. But like, find something creative for you to do works, that doesn't harm anyone, but that helps you. I think that is what we all need in our lives. I think one of the hardest things I've just recently moved in by myself, and one of the hardest things I've had to come to terms with is how much time I have on my hands. I am alone for so long, and I feel like I'm going stir crazy in a lot of these situations. And I think one of the things that I keep turning to is when my day gets real tough, I will go on my iPad and I will draw things. I'll draw things like the cover to this podcast, right? I'll grab my journal and I'll journal. I will grab my sketchbook and I'll sketch. I will play the same song I've played 300 times. 300 more times. Because I'm not quite hitting that note just right. And I want to hit it just right. And I'm not getting that hammer on. Or for some reason my thumb's starting to slip. Whatever the case is, right? I keep doing it. And in those moments, it is just such a nice brief respite from the onslaught of different things coming at you. Like the need to constantly be doing something, right? Like that is something that I have some issues with. Is like when I'm surveying my email, I'm like, I need something to do. I need something to do. I need something to do. I get to the end of my day. I've already worked out before work. I've already had food, and I'm not that hungry. What do I do? What do I do? Well, I could go for a walk, but I'm really not that into the idea of walking right now. I could go down to the pool, but it's closed today, right? What did I just draw? Well, what do I draw? Well, I have this inanimate object right here, right? Let me go like this, and let me just draw it on my sketch pad. Or I get my iPad, and I just say, you know what? That was my favorite pair of shoes. I love those shoes. Let me draw those shoes so I can remember them forever. And, whoa, that's kind of cool. What if I put a backdrop that kind of like looks like this? Okay, and then I start messing around and experimenting. And that's the beauty of it, is because like it starts because you're building skills. And where it ends is you're communicating with those skills. And that's the cool thing about the guitar metaphor, like learning that it's like you learn the basics so you can tell the story is just so cool, right? You have to learn letters to write words. You have to learn words to tell stories. You have to learn how to structure words in sentences to tell those stories better. You have to find something, right? The language you want to communicate in. That's all you're doing. You're finding the language you want to communicate in, and then you're communicating to the world what you have to say. I believe like that each and every one of us has something to say. We just may not know it, or we may not know how to say it. And art and creativity is how we do it. We all know it, right? Like we all. I was in Boston. Another story. Love it. You're here for it. Oh, touchdown. Sorry, I got the game on. I was in Boston recently, and I had some time before my flight, so I went to the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. And I saw, let me just double check. So I saw it. Oxidation painting is what it was called. It's from 1978, and it was created by Andy Warhol. It looked careless. It had nothing to it. I think I thought to myself, like, if you peed on a canvas, this is what it would look like. And if you know the painting I'm talking about, then you already know that is exactly what this painting is. he had painted it with this like metal coated painting that would oxidize. That's the oxidation. And then used human excrement in the form of urine to show that oxidation process. That's a novel idea. I guess it's creative. But I don't know if there's a story worth telling there. You tell me. Tell me in the comments if you agree that peeing on a canvas is art. But yeah, I think, I don't know. There's a feeling you get when you see, intention behind that art too. And like blah blah blah. We can go into this all day long because actually one of the things I came across in my research was talking about aesthetics being removed from art analysis, because if you look at other cultures, if you don't culturally align with that culture, you're probably not going to aesthetically like the art. And I thought it was a pretty good, interesting idea, because it referenced that to study religion, you would need an indifference to faith and an indifference to religion. But some people would argue that you have to have faith to understand faith. So, one of the things I don't like about the studies is they're trying to put a definitive term on something that's indefinable in a sense. And we have that with a lot of stuff. Going beyond that, generalizing, being my own form of AI here. If you have something to say, find a way to say it. Well, anyway, thank you for watching the first solo episode. This is going to be very difficult for me to put up, but you'll see it on YouTube. I appreciate you sharing and liking and subscribing. I don't need you to do it because, like I said, I'm just doing this to support my gear buying addiction. But thank you for showing up anyway. I really do appreciate it. I'd rather have 10 people who get something. I'd rather get one. Like, all I really want is to help people. So if I can help people through this, it'll all be like worth it. So thank you. Please come back for more. Or tell me it was a waste of your time so I can continue to do this and other people will know not to watch.